When Sherman reported into Washington, he met with General Winfield Scott. He wanted to leave immediately, but Scott had other ideas. Sherman was to serve as the Army's Inspector General. Although it was not what he wanted, the job gave him the ability to travel all around the Eastern theater of operations and see for himself the big picture. And what he saw was the folly of most of Washington, except for Scott, in believing in a short war. On to Richmond was in vogue. At the last moment, Sherman was placed in command of a brigade in McDowell's army. He summed up the situation. We had good organization and good men, but no cohesion, no discipline, no respect for authority, and no real knowledge of war. On the morning of July 21st, 1861, Sherman deployed his men on the north bank of Bull Run. A small incident occurred which, once again, gives you insight into his thinking. A rebel officer on horseback crossed Bull Run and came up upon the Yankee positions just out of musket range. There he proceeded to shout curses and insults at Sherman's men. Comp's sharp eye followed him carefully and noted the ford that the hot-headed officer had used to cross the stream. At 2 p.m., Sherman's unit was ordered to advance, so he marched his men to the remembered ford and got his brigade across in short order. The advance went well, but when they were close to the fighting, the terrain became rough, so the regiments had to be sent forward one at a time. This piecemeal commitment of the troops meant that they were each chewed up in turn. Finally, the men decided on their own that they had had enough. Despite their commander's urgings to stay, each unit began making its way slowly and deliberately to the rear. Therefore, wisely, Sherman guided them back to the ford and safely made it across. Unlike many other units, he kept his brigade in reasonably good order despite heavy losses. Sherman had kept his head, while many around him were losing theirs. In fact, on the way back, he formed the brigade into a strong defensive position for the follow-up attack he thought was coming. It never did. But the actions at Manassas caused him to sink into black depression. Never mind that he had predicted poor results and that he had performed very well. Defeat weighed heavily on his psyche. He could never choose again to lead volunteers, nor would he ever have much faith in them. During his depression, Sherman expected to be cashiered, as did a number of Union officers. Much to his surprise, he received a promotion to brigadier general. He was ordered that summer to serve under Robert Anderson, late of Fort Sumter. Before leaving, Anderson and his 4 assistants, Sherman, Thomas, Buell, and Burnsides, met with President Lincoln. Sherman had one request: to serve only in a subordinate capacity and not in high command. This gives us insight to his mind and his personal assessments of his own strengths and weaknesses. Anderson was ordered to keep Kentucky in the Union and to control 300 miles of front with only 18,000 men. Still reeling from Sumter, Anderson requested to be relieved of his command. Much to Sherman's horror, he was made commanding general. He was by nature tense and nervous, and this put him over the top. The enemy was led by the much-feared Albert Sidney Johnson, so our boy complained to everyone that he did not have the force to populate command he did not want. A conference with Secretary of War Cameron, he was asked how many men he would need. He exclaimed that just to hold the state, he would need 60,000 men. Cameron was shocked, and this was reported to the press as an insane request. From the newspapers reported that Sherman was insane. This was the source of his madness and also the beginning of his opinion of the press. Kump was fortunate his career did not end there. Halleck, his friend, gave him an assignment to be an inspector general in Missouri. But the Black Depression did not improve. It got worse. He was very concerned with how he appeared to others. From October to April, he was in the depths of despair. He noted this himself in his memoirs, and he was not to come out of this blue funk until the Battle of Shiloh. He went on to leave for a few weeks and came back to Halleck in a better frame of mind. In February, he was assigned to command a support unit. The unit supported Grant on his advance on what became the battles of Forts Henry and Donelson. It is interesting to note that at the time, Sherman had rank on Grant. Further, Grant had outrun his supplies in moving on to Donelson. Sherman was ordered by Halleck to help Grant, and, because of his rank, could have made command very difficult. This Sherman did not do. He was very deferential. With every boat that came up with supplies, he included a note of encouragement. Grant never forgot this, and thus a pattern for future was established. We should note what this means for our study of Sherman's mind. At this point, we are ready to put together everything. Here are the character traits that I believe explains his action during the Battle of Shiloh and during the rest of his military career. In no particular order, we have discussed these topics this evening. Although he will have serious lapse in the upcoming battle, Sherman was an objective observer of things how they are. He never really got over his feelings of abandonment and poverty of his childhood. He was both smart and flexible while being guided by an internal compass. Sherman was both likable and somewhat prideful, and this led him to be an excellent manager of men. In both business and battle, he was cool under pressure and learned from his mistakes. Sherman was resourceful and always played the hand he was dealt, and finally, he was loyal to superiors above him and subordinates below him. Like so many battles in so many wars, the Battle of Shiloh was never supposed to take place. It was Halleck's plan to combine Grant and Buell's forces into one large army led by Halleck. With Anderson out of the picture, Sherman now finds himself leading the 5th Division and was ready to move by river, starting from Paducah. Halleck understands logistics far better than any other commander in the West and needs to cut rebel supplies from east to Corinth, Mississippi. Sherman is given the independent mission to destroy the Memphis and Charleston Railroad. Starting on March 6th, they load transports and steam south, upriver, to accomplish the mission. Along the way, the ever-observant Sherman notes Pittsburgh Landing, where some of Hurlbut's divisions are already based. Continuing south, the expedition meets with rain and floods so severe as to endanger the naval vessels upon which it depends. He makes the decision to withdraw and disembark his troops at Pittsburgh Landing. This is an excellent ground for doing what Sherman needs to do, train his green troops. Grant concurs with this decision and sends all but one of his divisions there to wait for Buell's men and Halleck to take command. None of the Union commanders considered it necessary to construct defensive positions because all was quiet and the South had been retreating ever since a string of defeats. Sadly for the North, the rebels were thinking something else. Although the brilliant and aggressive Johnson was saddled with Beauregard's, plans were being made to strike Grant where he was, lest Buell could join him with overwhelming strength. Now began a series of encounters that should have warned the North that the rebels meant to attack them and not wait to be attacked in Corinth. The first occurred on April 1st, when Cheatham stumbled into Lew Wallace's division. Cheatham was well out in front of the main body of rebel troops due to the horrible logistical mess in the move up from Corinth. On the 3rd, cavalry was spotted. On the 4th, one of Sherman's units reported it had seen a sizable enemy force. Later that same day, more Southern cavalry was spotted. Prisoners were captured, who stated that they were part of a grand army.